Welcome back to A Shark's Perspective. It is so often that when I do shows with really smart people, we cover a lot of tips and tricks and performance hacks to make us better. How often, though, do you think about the amount of time it takes you to get better with all of that content you're consuming by reading? Wouldn't it be nice to become a much faster reader in order to get smarter and stay ahead of the competition? Howard Berg was recognized in 1990 by the Guinness World Record Book for his ability to read more than 25,000 words per minute, and he has widely been known as the world's fastest reader. And on this episode, we'll discuss some amazing and simple ways that he teaches to help people read faster, remember better, gain more context, EQ, a discount code for you to take advantage of his program, and yes, even a little bit about West Side Story. So let's tune in to the world's fastest reader with a shark you'd obviously want to read about on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Howard, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. If you would, tell us a little bit about your background and your career to date.
I'm considered the world's fastest reader. Fortunately, Guinness agree with me. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter as much.
Yeah.
They say you're the world's greatest lover. But unless it's just because your wife says so, it doesn't really make it so.
Yeah.
I read 80 pages a minute, and I used it to do a 4-year psych program in 1 year in college. I took 6 science courses at once with 3 part-time jobs and 2 4-hour labs. They said it was impossible. And it's when I realized they didn't teach learning. And I used what I was learning about the brain to learn, 80 pages a minute, which was considered very good. It was at the top rate. And then I got out of college. I wondered if it was me or I found a solution to the learning problem everyone's facing. So I got a group of young people, 11 to 15. I taught them the system, and they did a 30-chapter book in lifelong developmental psych in a week. Now, these were kids 11 to 15, and this is a sophomore course in college. They did it in a week. 15 out of 18 passed the CLEP, which is an AP test, for full credit. So it says, well, now it's not just about me. It's about making a difference. Most people would agree there's not enough smart people making a lot of good decisions right now in the world. No one's watching the news and saying, there's just too many smart people out there doing too many smart things. And so my job is to get it out there and help people to be the best at what they do so we can all benefit from everyone getting better.
So you knew this in college. Did you know it earlier in life? I mean, what was that moment where you figured out I can read a lot faster than most people?
It was a survival thing. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn. There were a lot of gangs, very violent. I mean, I had a knife to my throat. It was like West Side Story without the dancing and music. I met Bernardo. He didn't sing. He didn't dance. He definitely had a knife, and he wasn't being very friendly when he took my money. But I found one safe place in my neighborhood, the library. Gang kids would rather be dead than caught in a library, like
Right.
vampires in churches. So I was reading a lot. I was reading The Theory of Relativity when I was 8. So by the time I was 11, I had college reading. But it was out of necessity. You know, you get good at what you do all the time. That's what I did. My mom would say, go out and play. And I'd look at her like she was insane. Do you know where we live?
Yeah.
Going out to play meant go out and get beat up. You know, it was not a fun place to go out and play. So I stuck at what I was good at, which was reading. And it turned out to be a gift because now I can help people because sometimes the things that cause us the most pain in our lives end up being our greatest virtues and assets. You don't see it when you're suffering, but years later you look back and realize had that not happened, I probably wouldn't be here today doing what I do.
So if a vampire comes up, I don't grab holy water. I grab War and Peace. Maybe something like that. But
I never heard it that way before, but I like that. That's actually a clever way of framing it. Yes, I think that is true.
So how did you train yourself even at that early age? Because there's a lot of people that go to the library that read, but what you have is a different talent.
I'll go back further. Actually, there is another backstory. I don't usually go back this far.
Well, I didn't know if you were going through Dr. Seuss stories in like 3 seconds, you know?
No. But I did use them. When I was a very young child, I had a biological dad, and I was adopted when I was 8 by my regular dad. My biological dad was with Patton, and so
Yeah.
he had PSTD, and unfortunately, it took a big toll on him, and he ended up in a military hospital. And they told my mom she should get divorced, which is what she did. But he was a chemistry genius, so I was around science. We were building barometers when I was 2.5, 3 years old in my house. And when I was 6, I lived near my grandparents, and they lived across the street from the Brooklyn Children's Museum. And I was a guide at 6 years old. I was taking people on tours of the Science Museum and explaining everything. And I went to the astronomy planetarium every weekend for like 3 years. So I knew every single lecture. I helped do the astronomy in the planetarium. And I was around all the science and all these thinkers and people who were helping me. I remember I was like 7. I noticed the phases of the moon. I thought I discovered something, that sometimes it's big and sometimes it's small.
Yeah.
And so I went to them and said, did anyone ever notice the moon doesn't look the same all the time? And they showed me the motions of the moon around the earth. So my mind was on those things at a very, I would say when I was 3 or 4 years old, I was already learning science because of my parents' influence. And of course, my reading gravitated towards that type of material because that was my interest. So by the time I was 8, I already studied mythology. I'd studied all the comparative religions. I was an expert on astronomy, probably at least at the early college level, but I was 7 or 8 years old. I'll give you another one. So after I read the theory of relativity, I had some theories, and everyone thought I was crazy. Well, years later, I was working in Huntsville with the Strategic Defense Command people, and they were pretty smart at physics. So I said, just out of a lark, can I tell you some of the ideas I had when I was like 8 years old? Tell me if I was nuts or if there was any meaning to them. So they looked at me and they said, 5 of your ideas won Nobel Prizes. So I said, okay, then I wasn't nuts. They said, but of course you have to actually prove it. You know, having a good idea doesn't get you a Nobel Prize. But I was 8 years old. So I was different. But I feel it's a responsibility. If you're given that kind of a gift, you're supposed to use it. I just trained. In fact, I have something to share with you. I trained the strategic defense people in Fort Bragg a few months back, and they told me how the wounded warriors, there's about 20 to 22 of them a day committing suicide. I said, why? They said they can't find jobs. So well, I could teach them how to read so they can use the GI Bill, go back to school and get degrees and get jobs. They have no money. So well, my dad had PSTD when I was growing up as a child. I'll do it for free. So if you'd let people know, on September 7th, from 12 to 4, I'm doing a free program, a whole 4-hour reading program just for the wounded warriors. And there's a link at berglearning.com. Please don't take a seat from one of them. But I'm volunteering to do that because I think that's something I can give back. I wasn't in the military, but my dad was, and my adopted dad was in the Navy, and I've seen the sacrifices they made, and I would like to help them. So that's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, God bless. So for the rest of us mere mortals that didn't grow up, reading mythology and doing science experiments instead of watching Baby Shark and all the other stuff we see today, why do we read so slowly?
Good question, and I actually know the answer. When you're driving in a car on a highway, you might be going 65, 70 miles an hour, and you're reading the road. It's called reading the road. You're reading front, back, left, and right simultaneously, watching your gauges, watching your GPS, talking to your friends, turning on the radio, talking on the phone, and you're bored. There isn't enough going on. You can't wait to get where you're going. You read a book at about 200 words a minute in one direction, and most people remember about 10% of what they read. Why is so much more data being processed in the car effortlessly than in a book? And the answer is, in a car, everything is visual, like a movie. You're seeing images and picturing and taking in huge chunks of visual data, and it makes it easy to process. In a book, we're using our eyes to hear what we read, and it's a little person in the back of a head pronouncing one word at a time. Most of us read at the speed we talk. So I found a way to make it more visual, like driving, in just a few hours' time. And we did a double-blind study, an efficacy study using the Nelson-Denny, a standardized test for speed and comprehension. Everyone doubled or quadrupled with outstanding comprehension by learning how to be more visual and a little less auditory. And that's the answer to the question.
So what's a tip that most of us could try to start reading a little faster?
Oh, I can get you 20 to 40% faster in the next 90 seconds. How's that?
Go.
Pick a book after the podcast is over, pick a book you've read, preferably nonfiction. The only thing that could confuse you, since you know it already, is your speed. So if you don't know what you're reading, you know you're going too fast. Get a timer. Most of you have phones or smartwatches that can beep after a minute. Time yourself for a minute and read the way you normally do. Nothing different, just normal reading. And at the end of the minute, take a pencil or a pen and put a mark on the line where you finish. You know, that's how far you read now. That's an assessment. Now go to the second chapter, and I want you to use your hand and go from the left to the right margin with your eyes following your hand, one line at a time, as quickly as you can comprehend. What does that mean? As long as you know what you're reading, go quicker till you don't. And that's when you know you went too fast. And slow down just enough so your comprehension comes back. And for 5 minutes, go one line at a time as quickly as you can understand. And go back to the first chapter and test yourself for a minute, this time using your hand as quickly as you could comprehend. And you're going to astound yourself. You're going to go 20 to 40% further just doing that one change. And share this with the young people in your lives. There's a 50% dropout rate in 4-year college, 70% in 2-year college. More of them would finish if they knew what they were doing wrong. And this is one of the things we can do to help. So please do share this with young people you know.
Yeah, so I think I wrestle with, as much as anybody, because I read a lot, just making certain that I do get it to sink in. And that's the struggle. And I'm really interested how you sort of tackle that while one, you were in college, and then where you're seeing people use it today. So one, if they can read it faster is amazing, comprehend it while they're in that moment, but take that with them 5-10 minutes to a week from now so that they remember what they read. Maybe that's how they let it really sink into their brain. How do you help them do that?
Why don't we dissect what you asked and answer it in sequence to get everything you are looking for completed? How do you comprehend? What are you looking for so you understand what you're reading? And how do you remember it after you found it? That's really, I'm breaking down what you said,
Sure.
but that's what it comes to.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Let's begin with comprehension. The secret to comprehension comes from psychology. It's called schema. Now, that's a big word, but rather than define it, I'll demonstrate it so you can actually see how it works. That'll make it crystal clear. I'm going to recite some text. It has no schema. Watch how confusing it will be when you hear it, even though it's simple words. This is an easy thing to do. If possible, you could do it at home, but you could always go someplace else if it's necessary. Beware of overdoing it. This is a major mistake and may cost you quite a bit of money. Are you crystal clear on what we're talking about right now? Probably not. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that is a fair statement.
I'm going to read it again or recite it again. And this time I'll put a title on. It's only one word, just one word. And instantly everything will make sense because the word has schema. And you'll see how schema works as a result. Laundry. Laundry, this is an easy thing to do. If possible, you could do it at home, but you could always go someplace else if it's necessary.
Sure.
Beware of overdoing it. This is a major mistake and may cost you quite a bit of money. Are you confused now?
No.
So we're teaching people not just to go quicker, but what's important, where the schema is. In fact, the man who owned Evelyn Woods was Maurice Thompson Jr. And he hired me to teach his son to speed read. And he gave me a testimonial. It said, "You've gone past speed reading to speed learning, bringing it in the 21st century," because it really didn't work. You would know it was about chemistry. It was about biology. It was a news story. But you didn't really know what you read. Would you like to know what to look for?
Yes.
Would that be helpful?
Yeah.
Good. Many times people will tell me there's so much material, they don't know what they're looking for. It's overwhelming. Have you ever had that experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's content shock at everywhere you go.
What if I told you you only have to learn 5 things? Would that help?
Absolutely.
Would you like to know what they are?
I would love to know what are the 5 things I've got to learn to master the material.
The first thing is vocabulary. 80% of a new topic is learning words. Which words? If the writer is doing their job correctly, they make them look special. They bold, they italic, they underline, they put them in color, they put them in a table. They're saying, look at this, it looks different, pay attention, this is special. Those are the words you need to learn and know. Now, if you know it already, you don't need to learn it. The ones you don't know that look different are the ones you should focus on. Second, names. Who's in your book and what did they do? Who's there and what did they do? Third, any number, date, statistical formula. How do you use it? That's big in business, of course. Numbers are a big part of business. Fourth, in nonfiction particularly, most texts have headings and subheadings that are like file folders. They hold content that has a relationship. What are the 5 most important concepts in each section and subsection? The 5 takeaways. And lastly, any questions and answers. And here's a special tip. In textbooks in particular, and many nonfiction books as well, there are questions at the end of a chapter. Most people read and then they see the questions and don't know the answers. I tell people, read the questions first. Then you'll know what they expect you to know when you're done. Mm-hmm. So when you find it, you say, wait a minute, this is important. This is what they want me to know when I'm done. So your brain is more focused on it as a result. So if you know every word and what it means, every person, what they did, every number, date, statistic, and how it's applied, the main takeaways in every section, and the answers to every question, how much more would you need to know?
Give me an example of how this would work.
Look around you, everyone listening, look around you, unless you're in a car, and picture everything colored blue and memorize it. Look at everything blue. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah.
Now close your eyes unless you're in a car, and I want you to remember everything you looked at colored red. What happens? Your brain says, wait a minute, you said blue, not red. And blue things got bigger, louder,
right,
more pronounced. Sure. And everything else, including red, disappeared. There's a part of your brain that's designed to do this. It's called the reticular activating system, if you want to know what it is. So if you're in a mall and there's thousands of people, you don't walk around and say, I don't know you, I don't know you, I don't know. Look who's here. There's my friend, there's my sister. Hey, that guy works at the desk next to me. To see that face you knew, you had to also see the thousands of other faces you didn't know. Mm-hmm. But only when a match occurred, a significant match, did your brain alert you that someone was there. That same brain is reading. When you're looking for the words, the names, the numbers, the main ideas, the questions, that material will pop off the page like the face in the crowd. And so we're able to go 2, 3, 4 times faster using our brain's natural ability to find what matters, what's significant, so actually can learn better and comprehend more at the higher speed doing brain-based learning strategies than at the slower speed. And if you'd like, after I can show you how to retain it.
Yeah, please show us how to retain it.
A lot of times people will say to me, you read fast, do you remember anything? And I'm going to say, yeah, I'll give you an example. I did a graduate course in educational psych in 7 hours. I got a B+ in 50 minutes on the 6-hour AP test. Wow. I did the GRE in biology, graduate record exam for graduate school. I read 48 books in 3 nights. And these were not easy books: biochemistry, cell physiology, plant systematics, genetics, not light reading. I got 3 questions wrong. So I was in the 99th percentile in the world. And remember, my kids did this. They were 11 to 15. And so it's not just about reading, it's remembering. I thought I would do a memory exercise with you and our audience and show you how brilliant your brain is at learning when it has a system. Are you ready for it?
I'm ready.
I'm going to give you 10 things to remember. I won't show you how. That's our control group. This is how your brain works without a system.
Okay.
You want to remember pole, shoes, tricycle, car, glove, gun, dice, skate, cat, and bowling pins. Is it safe to say you don't know all 10 things perfectly backwards and forwards right now?
That is safe to say.
In 3 minutes or less, you'll know them perfectly, effortlessly, and it's actually a tool. So here's a sidebar. You remember 10% of what you read, but 90% of what you say and do. So let's say and do this with me when I ask you, because you're going to want to learn this. It's a tool and not just a drill.
Okay.
The Greeks discovered a shortcut for memorizing lists. Take a list you know, link it to the list you're learning. It takes less time. I'm going to bet everyone listening, including you, can count to 10. I think I'm on safe ground.
You are. I graduated from the 13th grade, so I'm with you.
I'm sure you can do this. So we're going to use those 10 numbers to learn 10 things super fast. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
The number 1 looks like a pole, like a flag pole or a lamp pole. When I say 1, you say pole. 1.
Pole.
Perfect. 2 is shoes. How many shoes do you wear?
Shoes. 2 shoes.
So what's 2?
2 shoes.
And 1?
Pole.
Perfect. 3 is a tricycle. How many wheels on a tricycle?
3.
So what's 3?
Tricycle.
2.
Shoes.
1.
Pole.
Getting smarter. 4 is a car. How many tires are on a car?
4.
What's 4?
Car.
Go to 2. Jump to 2.
Shoes.
1.
Pole.
3.
Tricycle.
Totally scrambled. It doesn't matter. Your brain's learning the system now. Now, you may make a few bumps on the way, but that's how you learn this. 5 is a glove. How many fingers are in a glove?
5.
What's 5?
Glove.
3.
Tricycle.
1.
Pole.
You went backwards. It's effortless. 6 gun. They love them in Texas. 6 gun. Like a cowboy, a 6-shooter. What's 6?
Gun.
4.
Car.
2.
Shoes.
7 is lucky in dice. So 7 is dice. What's 7?
Dice.
What was 5?
5 was glove.
3.
Tricycle.
1.
Pole.
Perfect. Rhymes work. Say 8 skate.
8 skate.
What's 8?
Skate.
6. What did they love in Texas?
Guns.
4.
That was a car.
2.
Shoes.
You're almost done. See how easy this is. 9 is a cat. How many lives does a cat
It
have?
has 9.
What's 9?
Cat.
7 is lucky in.
Dice.
5 is a.
Glove.
3 is a.
Tricycle.
1 is.
Pole.
Last one. 10. How many bowling pins are in a lane?
10.
10 bowling pins. What's 10?
Pins.
Let's do the list together you couldn't do. And everyone listening, do this with us. 1.
Pole.
2.
Shoes.
3.
Tricycle.
4.
Car.
5.
Glove.
6.
Guns.
7. Lucky in.
Dice.
8 rhymes with.
Skate.
9 is a.
Cat.
And 10.
Pins.
Perfect. Now you've learned a list that you can use. Here's how it's used. In business, numbers are very important, but they're often forgotten because they're confusing. Let's say you're in a hotel. You travel a lot. Mm-hmm. After a while, you forget the hotel rooms because they all seem like the same place.
Oh, yeah.
So here's how to remember it.
Yeah.
You're in room 314. We'll use the pictures as numbers. 3 is a tricycle. 1 is a pole. 4 is a car. Picture this. A tricycle hits a pole on a car. A tricycle hits a pole on a car. Tricycle, what number?
3.
It's a pole.
1.
On a car.
4.
That's your room number. But it's also the value of pi in geometry to measure a circle. So children use this in science, math, and history. Business people use it to learn numbers percentages, due dates, product SKUs, phone numbers, room numbers in hotels. So now you have a way, and 0 is 10 bowling pins. So now you have a way to memorize numbers. This is one of many systems.
So, what are you hearing back as you're teaching this to people, especially to business leaders? How is this helping them? What kind of feedback you're getting? I mean, if you just go look at your site, I've seen some of the people we've talked about. You got Kevin Harrington, who was an original shark from Shark Tank. You've got
he's a friend of mine.
Is it Brian Tracy? I mean, you've got some amazing people that you've networked with. You've been on a ton of shows. You've networked with some of the biggest names, the Zigglers of the world, who are out selling stuff. And, Dan Kennedy. I mean, all these guys. But you're hearing feedback, I'm sure, from a lot of business leaders who you've taught this to that have focused on more important things. What are you sort of hearing?
Well, they make more money.
Yeah.
They make fewer mistakes. I had an 84-year-old read 3 books in 3 hours. So I tell a normal business person, if you spend 30 minutes a day, in 3 days, you'll finish your book easily. You probably will finish it in 2 days, but let's say 3. If you're reading a business book every 3 days, that's 100 new skills a year after year after year. What would that do to your bottom line?
Yeah.
How many more things would you be able to innovate? How many more dots can you connect? How could you stay ahead of the competition? You can stay on top of current events that impact your industry, laws, rules, regulations, changes in technology, business skills, everything you need to learn. You don't get compensated for that time, especially in industries like law and medicine, accounting, where you have to take continuing ed credits and it takes a lot of your time up, but without it, you lose your license. By cutting their time in half, they're able to have more time to do things they rather do. They make more money. I've read about 30,000 books. Like, I think if I was an idiot, I'd be well informed. But I would train Prudential Realty at their conference. I was the key speaker. I work with Pfeiffer and Son. They're the biggest publisher of training materials for companies. And they said not only did I teach them how to learn, but how to make their books brain friendly, so people would understand and remember. In fact, here's something to think about in business. What are you doing to make the data you give people easy to remember when they need to use it? So you're not just telling people what they need to know, but how to know it when they need it. You know how many people forget what you tell them, don't do it correctly and blame you and want money back, refunds, or don't give you referrals? Imagine if we stopped just telling people what they need to know and also told them how to remember it when they needed to know it. How much better would that be? Good example, I teach you to drive. You're ready for your road test. You failed. Why did you fail? Because you got nervous. That's an emotional intelligence problem. What if I also taught you how to stay relaxed and not just how to drive? Now you'd be able to pass the road test and I'd have more referrals. And emotional intelligence is one of the most important things we can learn. People need to be in a certain state of mind to use what you teach them. So if I taught you to drive and how to stay relaxed during the road test, you'd not only know how to drive, but how to not fail the test because you got nervous, which happens to a lot of the people who learn how to drive.
Sure.
Or in business, you've got very competent people who are nervous standing on a stage or being in front of people. And so their genius doesn't get utilized properly because of their fear of being seen in public. These are all EQ problems. By teaching people how to create the states they need to successfully do their jobs, and clients and prospects how to stay in the right state, so when you give them information they need to implement, they can do it correctly, you would get a much better return, more referrals, happier people.
So just you personally then, have you learned to enjoy reading any differently because of it? Or do you ever slow read to relax yourself any further? Or is there no cognitive difference from what you notice when you're reading?
You're asking a good question. I don't read the same all the time.
Yeah.
You don't chug Dom Perignon. You don't look at a Mona Lisa on a skateboard. And you don't read a sonnet in a second and a half and cry over the beauty of the words. Some things are meant to be embraced, and the ambiance takes emotions and needs response. When I'm reading something like a novel, which I rarely do, I tend to read nonfiction. I speed through the boring parts because I didn't want to read them anyway. I still know what's happening. I just don't feel anything, which is better
Yeah.
than boredom. And then I go back to a slower speed to experience the emotional gratification that I was looking for. But I'll be honest with you, I don't like reading. I like learning. Can I give you an example of what I mean by that?
Yeah, of course.
About 15 years ago, my wife wanted to go to Hawaii, and I was lecturing on different cruises, and they had one going to all the islands. I said, great. They said, they don't want speed reading. That's what I did. I said, what do they want? They said, they want someone to do photography, video, and Photoshop. And I immediately said, well, I teach that, which I didn't, but I wasn't lying because I knew I would learn it. I learn 80 times faster than normal.
Right.
So the next day, I bought 10 books on Photoshop because I don't think one book is how you learn. 10 people doing what you need to do, that's a business plan. But I can read it in 3 hours. So I read 10 books in 3 hours. I learned Photoshop. Next day, I read 10 books on video in 3 hours. I learned video. Next day, I read 10 books on photography. And I went to the cruise thinking, please, let these be 90-year-olds who don't know what a camera is. That would be my perfect audience.
Mm-hmm.
The first man walks in. I'm a professional photographer, 38 years. I hear you teach photography. I came to learn. I'm like, okay. I learned it last week, right? The second guy comes in. I've been doing Photoshop for 5 years. I hear you're an expert. I came to learn. My wife's in the front row crying because they said if I didn't do it, they'd throw us off the boat.
Right.
Not in the water. We got shore. So for a week, I'm teaching these people who are experts, photography, video, and Photoshop. At the end of the week, they said, how many years did you study to learn that? I couldn't say I learned it in 3 hours last week. That's what I love. People in business don't want to spend 4 years learning Photoshop or photography or video. There's so many things we can use in our businesses. I want to learn it in 2 or 3 hours and use it, not spend the next 6 months trying to figure it out. That's what I love. To me, reading is a screwdriver or a saw or a hammer. You don't get excited by tools in your toolbox.
Sure.
It's what you build that's exciting. Reading is a way to build success and learning and knowledge. It's a means to an end. Nobody reads for the sake of reading, but it does have a side benefit. As you grow older, it keeps your brain mentally fit. People who read have lower onset of dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's been proven. I read this on a show 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago in 90 seconds. And I remember it was the Baltimore and Seattle longitudinal study on aging. 80-year-olds who were readers had a much higher level of mental acuity and cognitive function than non-readers. And if you had no other reason to want to read, that would be enough. But in business, information doubles every 90 days. Every 90 days. So how the hell are you supposed to stay on top of all that information reading 200 words a minute? You can't. So it's not just a soft skill anymore. It's about knowledge management, staying on top of the data flow that's the lifeblood of your industry, of your business, and applying what you're learning to stay ahead of the competition. Would you rather be Blockbuster or Redbox right now? Blockbuster didn't adapt. Redbox took over. People who don't adjust, if they think everything's great, yeah, today, but 6 months from now, 6 years from now, technology shifts. If you're not part of that shift, if you're not an early mover, you're going to be left behind, just like Blockbuster. And you're going to wonder what the hell happened. I was the number one industry provider in my area, and now I'm bankrupt. Look at Sears and J.C. Penney. Do you know Bezos didn't do anything new? He took a catalog, which they had,
right,
and put it online. They didn't put it, they had everything. They had the catalog. They had the inventory. They had the capacity to deliver. They didn't do it. They stayed with the old retail market modality. And Bezos says, no, I could put the catalog they were doing 100 years ago online. He's the richest man in the world. They're going bankrupt.
Exactly.
It's about keeping ahead of the competition by learning. And that's what it's about.
Well, Howard, you're on a shark's perspective. I read a lot of books about sharks if I'm not spending time in the water with them. But I would love to know, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
Trying to think. Well, I love the Great White because of the movie. It was just, it
Yeah.
was the star of the movie. Let's be honest, it really was. But I was a biologist. I told you that. Sharks are one of the oldest
Yeah.
creatures on the planet. People don't realize how many millions of years they lived when the dinosaurs were here.
Yeah.
They did something right. They're still here. They're amazing. Do you know sharks never sleep?
Agree.
They
Yeah.
swim their entire life. They're always awake. They're an amazing animal. They're very well adapted to their environment. And the only thing really threatening to sharks is people. And we're doing a lot of harm. People think they're monsters. They're
They're
a
not.
vital part of
Nope.
the ocean ecosystem. And it hurts me to see people thinking these are something we should be hunting and mounting on our walls. Leave them alone. Do you know that since 1970, half of the world's wildlife has died?
Yeah.
We're wildlife. This is scaring me.
Yeah.
There's a tipping point. When the bees are gone, there'll be no food, and they're going. We have to realize we're part of an interconnected web, and sharks are one of those things. And if we don't start respecting other organisms and start respecting our planet, we're going to go the route of the dinosaurs on our own account, not because of a meteor, because we're being greedy and stupid looking at short-term gains over long-term benefits. And our children and our grandchildren are going to pay the price for our foolishness. And who knows if there'll be another generation. Many biologists have these aren't crazy people, serious doubts about the viability of the human race past 4 or 5 more generations, given the rate of species decline that's happening today.
Well, Howard, normally people just say hammerhead or
I'm
great
sorry.
white. No, no. Anybody that knows me knows how charged I get about the environment. Well, at least the oceans anyway, and about sharks and how much of an advocate of them as somebody who swims with them, who knows they're not brutal monsters. So I am more than many levels. I appreciate your answer, and as big of a fan as I am of sharks, I don't think they can read as many words as we can.
No, they
So
don't read. They have a
we've
lot
got
of
them beat
talent.
with
Reading
that.
isn't one of them.
Exactly. Exactly. You do not hear reading is fundamental in
They're
shark
not my
school.
market. I don't really market much to sharks. I'll be honest with you.
Exactly. All right. So, Howard, are you ready for that special time of the show where you'll get the 5 most interesting, important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I'm ready. You
All right.
warned me about this.
I did. I tried. Number 1, the New York Times or the Dallas Morning News?
New York Times.
All right.
The New York Times is a world-renowned and respected newspaper. It's a nation's newspaper versus a city's. The Dallas Morning News is a fine paper. I've been in it many times. They have very good writers and good staff. But the New York Times is a world-renowned source of data. They're a national paper like USA Today. And so I have to say the New York Times is probably one of the most respected papers in the world.
All right, number 2, you were on guests on both their shows early on in the Comedy Central days. Dennis Leary or Jon Stewart?
I'll be honest with you. I had more fun with Dennis because I was on his show 7 times. When I was on with John, I was on with Howard Stern. And Howard took the show over from both of us. And at the end of the show, John said, I didn't get to say 2 lines. It was my first show. Howard just dominated it. And I didn't get to say more than 2 lines. So I love John. I think he's one of the most brilliant comedians, satirists. He's done so much good for this country. So if you ask me which one do I like better as a person, John, he's done more. Dennis is a great guy, but John's done more for the country. But I enjoyed working with Dennis more because with Dennis I actually got to do something, and with John, neither of us got to do anything. Howard took the show over, if that makes sense.
It does. Number 3, since you brought it up earlier, the music from West Side Story or the music from Los Del Rio in the Macarena?
West Side Story. I grew up with that.
Yeah, I
I
figured as
lived
much.
it. I lived it.
Number 4, Guinness Book of World Record holder or an unlimited pitcher of Guinness?
I don't drink,
There
so
you
I'm going to
go.
say the book. I actually have some kidney issues, so I can't drink.
Okay.
So I prefer the book to
We'll go with the book. Number 5, and the most important question you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Not an issue for me. Biscuits. I love biscuits.
Good man.
It's one of my favorite things to get at a restaurant. It's a good warm biscuit, flaky, buttery. I think it's one of the delicacies we can have at breakfast.
Yeah. Well, I tell people all the time, my friends in New York work in advertising firms there are no Cracker Barrels in Manhattan or anywhere near around, so they don't get to appreciate country biscuits nearly enough. But Howard, where can people find out more about you, start getting the service, and start learning to read a lot faster?
To go to Berg Learning, BERG learning.com. First, there's some free lessons.
Yeah.
We have great programs that'll increase their capacity to learn, help their kids get through school, and their parents stay mentally fit. We have a total satisfaction guarantee and a support team. And if they can't fix it, I will. I personally make sure everyone learns it. And if they can, I'm a Rotarian. I give them their money back. I think people should get what they paid for and not have to pay for it. Berglearning.com, put in Shark 10. You'll get 10% off as a thank you for listening to this. And I will make sure you get what you've paid for, so that if you don't pay for it. How's that?
Absolutely.
That's the way I look at it. And the result is, for the rest of your life, you'll be learning faster, understanding better. You can increase your productivity, make more money, make fewer mistakes, get your kids not to live with you till they're 40, which is happening today because they can't make a living, because they learned how to learn and learn new skills so they can make a living. And your grandparents aren't going senile because they learned how to stay mentally fit. Everybody wins. I make a living, but I get paid because I actually did what I promised.
Awesome. Shark 10.
Berglearning.com. Go there now.
You got it. Howard, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective.
I had fun. I appreciate you having me.
You bet. So there was my conversation with Howard Berg, who was recognized in 1990 by the Guinness World Record Book for his ability to read more than 25,000 words per minute, and he has widely been known as the world's fastest reader. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from our conversation with him. First, if the amount of information you are required to consume is growing at the rate we know that it is, then how are you supposed to be able to keep up? Howard says it's about knowledge management, and I cannot disagree with that. You also don't get compensated directly for the time that you spend on learning through reading, so a perfect way to do that, if you can still comprehend it, is to be able to read and consume that content more quickly. So his first test, in short, is to get a book, then get a timer, read the way you normally do. Put a mark on the line that you've read to after 1 minute. Next, use your hand as a guide, moving left to right, and read as fast as you can to comprehend. Test yourself. It's a little more elaborate than that, but you'll go 20 to 40% further at reading. I tried it and it worked for me. Second, one way that I was looking at the purpose of the show was to help people with the content that we write. We should clearly formulate our stories and help create context to those stories. He talks about simple things like what the words are that matter and bolding them. That's obvious to most, but when I went back after this and looked at some content that I'd worked on previously with teams, I found that it should have had better messaging at the core. You know, it's easy to write 1,000 words for a blog post, but for a lot of writers, they still miss telling a simple and consistent point that stands out to the reader, which is generally your consumer. My point is, regardless of how fast you read it and consume it, that content should stand out. Third, learn to read faster and then read as much as you can. We've heard this for years, that most CEOs read 4 to 5 books per month. Howard can read that same amount in about an hour. So whether you're reading fast or slow, just know that knowledge is power, and reading is one part, but a fundamental one in gaining that knowledge. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for the privilege of your time. And I love this quote: so many books, so little time. That's what Frank Zappa famously said. But just think about what he would have said if he'd taken advantage of Howard's program. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.